fellow aviators, this is something that I swore I'd never do, and that was put myself visually on YouTube anyway. Now, the airplane is one thing. Me, that's another matter. But I'm doing it. I'm going to give a real quick review on the Tailwind 150 hours later. You're going to hear a little noise in the background. My neighbor in the hangar, a couple of them down, is working on his hangar, getting it set up for his Baron, which, as many of you know, is one wing is longer than this entire airplane. But that is getting off topic. So I'm not a high time Tailwind pilot. This is a W10-8. I call it a W8 because it's more of a W8 than it is a 10. I won't get into the reasons why at this point, but it does have the O200A with the C90 pistons in it, and they tell me it's rated at 108 horsepower, and I'll just have to take their word for it. 3 years later, and 150 hours, give or take, with this particular airplane that I did not build. It came up from southern Alabama. The builder is James Shiver. He did a beautiful job on the airplane. It is touching 20 years old now, and the engine has just over 500 hours. When I first bought it and was getting checked out in it, I hadn't flown a sensitive airplane in almost 3 decades. I thought it would come back to me right away, and I wasn't too concerned about it. That airplane I'm speaking of previously was a Sonnery 2, which is a nice little airplane, a high-functioning little airplane for horsepower, not twitchy but sensitive, and that's what I call this boy here. When I first got into it, I thought maybe I bit off more than I could chew. A couple hours later, the gentleman that brought it up had also flown the Tailwinds, and he was CFII and flies a jet for a living. He decided that I was okay to go in it. I didn't like the control system. Initially, it had the side stick or center stick, the normal configuration, so to speak, with a stick in between the seats, and then the trim lever, and then the flaps, and the throttle on the left. And you can imagine the gymnastics you would have to do on final approach, getting to the flaps and setting the throttle, things like that. So I did put 2 center sticks in. Basically, it's an upside down T, the bar going straight across underneath your legs, and 2 sticks coming up between them. And I moved the throttle to the center of the panel, and it made a huge difference almost immediately in how I was able to handle the airplane. With the 108 horsepower in it, initial climb out with me, and consider me 200 pounds, full fuel, 24 gallons, and a little bit of baggage on an 85-degree day at 820 feet above sea level. I get initially 1,400 feet a minute rate climb with this prop, and it settles down to about 1,100. I just got down with it today after a few minutes of flying, and the density altitude is about 4 times what it would normally be here. So it was 1,000 feet a minute and about 800 feet after it settled down. And that's climbing out at 90 miles an hour. All of my airspeeds are in miles per hour, not knots. The stall speed on this doesn't seem to matter enough, whether it's high density altitude or normal. It is, with full flaps, 50 miles per hour. You feel it in the tail, then you hear it. You hear it in the tail, then you feel it in the stick a little bit, and it just gently drops through and starts flying again. It is 60 miles an hour clean, without both notches of flaps. The airspeeds with just 1 notch of flap doesn't change significantly as far as the stall goes. This airplane is extremely straightforward in that regard. Steep turns, 60, 70 degree banks are no issue maintaining altitude. But it is sensitive, especially with the center sticks. You don't have to move them very far, and this thing is standing on a wing. Landings, I come down final at 80 miles an hour, and I try to hold that coming over the fence. I drop the first notch of flaps, at 90 on the downwind, and then I don't drop the second notch of flaps till on a real short final, because that nose is going to get lowered to maintain airspeed. And she'll settle right out beautifully in the 70-mile-per-hour range. To be honest with you, I'm looking too far down the runway to be glancing at my airspeed. I've gotten to the point now where I can feel the airplane out really well. In short, this airplane, I think, is probably one of the best airplanes, if not the best airplane I've ever owned. And I have owned probably close to a dozen aircraft over the years. I've been flying 37 years. That is not to disparage any of the airplanes I own. I have a very strong affection for a Piper Tri-Pacer that I sold. And I still have a little bit of buyer's remorse, but these two just don't compare. This is a sporty airplane, for those of you that have never flown one. It is not something that you can get out of I'll say a conventional airplane like a Cessna or a Cherokee and jump into it and fly it safely. I mean, there might be a select few of you that can do that, but I would not recommend it. I would recommend going up, and if you can't get checked out in your tailwind, at least go up. I would say somebody with an RV, somebody that has some experience flying airplanes that are a little more sensitive, and then get a little bit of an idea how this is going to handle, and then be prepared for it to be different, even then. Boy, there's not a whole lot else I can tell you about it. I've done my best glide speeds. This thing is about 9 to 1 at 90 miles an hour. And I know there's some people out there going to go, oh, wait a minute. I have done several runs on this at different airspeeds, varying altitudes, and it's pretty doggone close to that. It might be 8.5 to 1. At 80 miles an hour, it settles into about 7.5 to 1. At 70 miles an hour, don't even go there. It begins to come out of the sky pretty quick. Again, it stalls at 60. So you're going to have some issues. Once it drops below 70, you better be right on top of things. Landing is straightforward. It is the best handling, and I say this in all sincerity, it is the best handling conventional gear airplane I've ever had the privilege of landing. I'm sure a lot of it has to do with Steve Wittman and his design of the landing gear, but an awful lot of it has to do with the build that just tracks out. I've landed it in gusting, 40-degree, 18-knot crosswinds. And frankly, I didn't like what the AWAS was saying, so I shut it off and put it on the ground, and it was just beautiful. The airplane handled it better than the pilot does by a long shot. I've had it up to 9,500 feet, and with a normally aspirated below 200, even on a cool day, it's starting to work a little bit. I would never anticipate flying this thing any higher than 7,000, 7,500, unless I had to squeak over, maybe a small mountain pass or something in the southern portion of the United States. But at 5,000, it'll climb right up to 5,000 through 7,500 without too much problem to maintain 700 feet per minute rate of climb. But again, at 9,500, I was down to about 200 feet per minute, and that was high enough at this point with this little bird. Wingspan on this, for those of you that may be tuning in for the first time, is 24-foot wingspan and 19.5 feet long. This particular airplane is 725 pounds empty. Grosses out in the neighborhood of 1250, 1275. I've had it at full gross on a hot day. Two 200-pound pilots, full of fuel, and it's still climbing out around 700 feet a minute. Settles into the 5.5, 600 feet per minute range. But for a little over 200 that's burning just under 4 gallons an hour, I don't consider that bad performance at all. I don't have any intention of switching this out to a bigger engine. With this particular power plant installed, I have an easy 5-hour duration with an hour reserve, and that's longer than I will go in any one stretch of any airplane before I land and stretch go take care of a couple things, get a cup of coffee, and then get up the ambition to head out again. As of yet, I haven't done any long cross countries in it. The weather this summer has been kind of odd here in Michigan. I think it's been kind of that way all over the states. We do plan on doing some longer trips in it. I just haven't managed to pull it off yet. Other than that, I'm going to cut this short because it'll get boring. But again, airspeed, tops out close to 150. I cruise 130 with it. Burns 4 gallons an hour. Stalls absolutely beautifully. And just performs extremely well for what it is. And for me, that's enough. Thanks for watching.